A pale shaft of moonlight illuminated Olivia Matthews as she lay unmoving beside the cracked well, her parched lips cracked and bleeding, her once vibrant auburn hair now dulled with dust and desperation. The merciless Arizona Territory sun had beaten down on her for 2 days, her broken ankle preventing her escape from this desolate spot after her stagecoach had been attacked by bandits. Death seemed certain until the rhythmic hoofbeats broke the night's silence and a tall silhouette appeared on the horizon. The year was 1878, and the harsh landscape of the Arizona Territory showed no mercy to those unprepared for its brutal indifference. Olivia had been traveling west to start anew after her father's death left her with nothing but debts and painful memories in Boston. The stagecoach journey was to be her passage to a teaching position in Tucson, where a small school had requested her services. Now she was certain she would never see that schoolhouse. As consciousness faded in and out, Olivia heard the approaching horse slow to a walk. Through half-lidded eyes, she saw boots hit the ground and spurs jingle as their owner approached. She wanted to cry out to beg for help, but her throat was too dry, her strength too far gone. "Madam," the voice was deep, tinged with concern. "Good Lord, what happened to you?" Strong hands gently turned her over, and Olivia found herself looking up into the weathered face of a man in his early 30s. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, studied her with concern beneath the brim of a dusty brown hat. A day's worth of stubble covered his jaw and a bandana hung loose around his neck. "Water," she managed to croak. Without hesitation, he pulled a canteen from his saddle and carefully tipped a small amount into her mouth. "Easy now, too much at once will make you sick." The water felt like heaven against her parched throat. As some semblance of awareness returned to her, Olivia noticed the star pinned to the man's vest. "Name's Sheriff Samuel Blackwood," he said, helping her take another small sip. "You're lucky I decided to take the long way back to town tonight." "Olivia Matthews," she whispered. "Stagecoach, robbers." Samuel nodded grimly. "The garrison gang's been hitting the stages on this route, been tracking them for weeks." His eyes took in her torn dress, the unnatural angle of her ankle and the bruises on her arms. "You're hurt bad. Need to get you to a doctor." With extreme gentleness that belied his rugged appearance, Samuel lifted Olivia into his arms. She winced as pain shot through her ankle, but the relief of being found outweighed any discomfort. "My horse can carry us both to Redemption," he said, referring to the small town where he served as sheriff. "It's about 2 hours' ride from here. Can you hold on that long?" Olivia nodded weakly, already feeling safer in this stranger's strong arms than she had felt in years. The journey to Redemption was a blur of pain and half-consciousness for Olivia. Samuel kept her secure in front of him on his horse, one arm wrapped protectively around her waist while the other held the reins. He spoke to her occasionally, keeping her awake, telling her about the town that was to become her temporary haven. "Redemption's not much to look at," he admitted, "but we've got a good doctor. Doc Miller's patched me up more times than I care to count. Why did you become a sheriff?" Olivia asked, desperate to focus on something other than her pain. Samuel was quiet for a moment before answering. "Lost my brother to an outlaw when I was 16. Decided then that I wanted to make sure other families didn't have to go through that." There was something in his voice, a weight of experience and sadness that spoke of a man who had seen too much of life's darker side. Yet there was also a steadfast quality, a sense of purpose that Olivia found herself admiring despite her discomfort. When the scattered lights of Redemption finally appeared in the distance, Olivia could have wept with relief. The small frontier town was little more than a main street with a handful of buildings on either side, but to her, it looked like salvation. Samuel rode directly to a small house at the edge of town with a sign reading "Dr. Miller, Physician" hanging beside the door. Before Olivia could even register their arrival, Samuel had dismounted and was carrying her up the steps. The door opened to reveal a gray-haired man in his 60s, spectacles perched on his nose, wearing a rumpled shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "Samuel, what's this now?" the doctor asked, immediately stepping aside to let them enter. Found her out by Crooked Canyon Dock, stagecoach robbery. She's dehydrated, exhausted, and her ankle's broken for sure. Dr. Miller motioned toward an examination table in his front room. Set her down here, gently now. Samuel lowered Olivia to the table with such care that she barely felt the movement. As the doctor began to examine her, Samuel stepped back but didn't leave. Instead, he removed his hat and stood watching, concern etched on his features. "You've had a rough time, miss." Dr. Miller paused, looking at her questioningly. "Matthews." "Olivia Matthews," she managed, her voice still raspy. "Miss Matthews, I'll need to set that ankle and get some fluids in you. You're suffering from severe dehydration and exposure." He looked up at Samuel. "She'll need a place to stay while she recovers. The boarding house is full with those railroad surveyors in town." Before Olivia could worry about this new problem, Samuel spoke up. "She can stay at my place. I've got a spare room my sister uses when she visits." Dr. Miller raised an eyebrow but nodded. "That would be suitable." "Now I need to set this ankle, and it's going to hurt something fierce." Olivia's eyes widened in fear, but then Samuel was beside her, offering his hand. "Squeeze as hard as you need to," he said softly. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Olivia saw nothing but reassurance and strength in his gaze. She took his hand, surprised at how comforting the touch of this stranger felt when Dr. Miller manipulated her ankle back into position. Olivia's scream pierced the quiet night, and she clutched Samuel's hand with all her might. Tears streamed down her face, but Samuel didn't flinch or pull away. He stayed steady, a rock in the storm of her pain. "You did well," he murmured as Dr. Miller began to splint the ankle. "The worst is over now." After the doctor had finished his work and given Olivia some laudanum for the pain, Samuel once again carried her in his arms, this time to a modest 2-story house a short distance from the sheriff's office. "It's not much," he said apologetically as he shouldered open the door, "but it's clean and quiet." The house was indeed simple, with sturdy wooden furniture and few decorations, but it had a warmth to it that spoke of a home rather than just a house. Samuel carried Olivia up a narrow staircase to a small bedroom with a quilt-covered bed and a window that would catch the morning sun. With careful movements, he set her on the bed, making sure her splinted ankle was properly supported. "I'll bring you some water and something to eat." "You must be starving." Olivia nodded weakly, the laudanum beginning to take effect. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." Samuel's expression softened. "Get some rest, Miss Matthews. You're safe now." As he left the room, Olivia felt herself drifting into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in days, the image of Samuel's kind blue eyes following her into her dreams. The next few days passed in a haze of sleep and recovery for Olivia. She awoke to find that Samuel had arranged for the town's seamstress, a kind widow named Mrs. Porter, to help with her personal needs and to bring her fresh clothing since her own had been mostly destroyed in the attack. On the third morning, Olivia felt strong enough to sit up properly and take stock of her situation. The bedroom was simple but comfortable, with a small dresser, a washstand, and a rocking chair near the window. Someone Samuel, she presumed, had placed a vase of wildflowers on the windowsill, adding a touch of color to the room. A gentle knock at the door preceded Mrs. Porter's entry with a breakfast tray. "Good morning, dear. You're looking much better today, some color in those cheeks at last." "I feel better," Olivia admitted, accepting the tray of eggs, toast, and coffee gratefully. "Has Sheriff Blackwood left for the day?" Mrs. Porter smiled knowingly. "He's downstairs, actually. Been working from home these past days to keep an eye on you." Never seen him so concerned about anyone before. This revelation sent an unexpected flutter through Olivia's chest. "He's been very kind." Kind doesn't begin to cover it. That man's been sleeping in his chair downstairs rather than in his own bedroom across the hall, just so he could hear if you called out in the night. Mrs. Porter adjusted Olivia's pillows. "Sent telegrams to Tucson about you too. The school knows you're safe and recovering." Olivia's eyes widened. "He did that, but how did he know about the school? You talk in your sleep, dear," Mrs. Porter said with a chuckle. "And Samuel Blackwood doesn't miss much. Now eat up." The sheriff says if you're feeling up to it, he'd like to ask you some questions about the robbery when you're done with breakfast. After Olivia had eaten and Mrs. Porter had helped her change into a borrowed dress, there was another knock at the door. Samuel entered, hat in hand, looking somewhat less weathered than he had the night he found her. He'd shaved, and his dark hair was neatly combed, though it still curled slightly at the ends. "Miss Matthews," he said, his deep voice filling the small room, "it's good to see you sitting up." "How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to you," Olivia replied, suddenly aware of how thin the borrowed dress was and how unkempt she must look despite Mrs. Porter's help. "Mrs. Porter tells me you've been sleeping in a chair because of me. I'm so sorry for the inconvenience." Samuel waved off her concern. "It's no trouble. My job is to look after the people of this town, and right now that includes you." He hesitated before adding, "Besides, I've slept in far worse places during my years tracking outlaws." He pulled the rocking chair closer to the bed and sat down, his large frame making the chair seem smaller than it was. "If you feel up to it, I'd like to ask you about what happened with the stagecoach. Any details you can remember about the men who attacked you could help me bring them to justice." Olivia nodded, steeling herself to revisit the terrifying experience. There were 4 of them. They wore bandanas over their faces, but one had a scar that ran through his eyebrow down to his cheek. You could see it even with the bandana. Samuel's expression sharpened. "That would be Luke Garrison. He's the youngest of the gang, but the meanest by far." He pulled out a small notebook. "What else do you remember?" For the next hour, Olivia recounted the details of the attack, how the stagecoach had been forced to stop, how the passengers had been ordered out and relieved of their valuables, how she had tried to run when one of the bandits had become too forward with her and had fallen down an embankment, severely injuring her ankle in the process. "I think they assumed I was dead or not worth the trouble," she concluded. "I dragged myself to that well, hoping someone might come along, and then you found me." Throughout her account, Samuel listened intently, occasionally making notes, his jaw tightening when she described the bandits' treatment of her and the other passengers. When she finished, he closed his notebook and looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're a brave woman, Miss Matthews. Not many would have survived what you went through." He hesitated before asking, "What will you do now? Your teaching position in Tucson is still waiting, according to their reply to my telegram." Olivia looked down at her splinted ankle. "I won't be able to travel for some time, according to Dr. Miller, and truthfully, I don't know if I could face another stagecoach journey right away." Samuel nodded understandingly. "Redemption School has been without a teacher since Miss Holloway left to get married last spring. It's not Tucson, but it's a good town with good people. If you'd consider staying, at least temporarily, I'm sure the town council would be grateful." The offer caught Olivia by surprise. "You'd want me to stay and teach here? This town needs educated people like you," Samuel said simply. "And—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his normally composed features. "I'd feel better knowing you were safe here while you recover." Their eyes met, and in that moment, Olivia saw something beyond professional concern in Samuel's gaze, something that made her heart beat a little faster. Before she could respond, however, there was a commotion downstairs and the pounding of boots on the stairs. "Sheriff." A young deputy appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. "Just got word from a rancher out near Twin Pines. The Garrison gang hit another stage, but this time there was a passenger who fought back, shot one of them before they killed him." Samuel was on his feet immediately, all trace of softness gone from his expression. "Which one got hit?" "Don't know for sure, but the driver said it was the one with the scar." Samuel's eyes darkened. "Luke. If he's wounded, they might hole up somewhere close instead of heading back to their usual hideout." He turned to Olivia. "I'm sorry, but I have to go." Olivia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course, please be careful." For a brief moment, Samuel's professional demeanor slipped, and he reached out to touch her hand lightly. "I'll be back as soon as I can. Think about what I said about staying in Redemption." And then he was gone, leaving Olivia with the lingering warmth of his touch and a decision to make. The next 3 days passed slowly for Olivia. Mrs. Porter visited regularly, bringing meals and town gossip. Through her, Olivia learned more about Samuel Blackwood, how he had come to redemption 5 years ago when the town was still rough and lawless, how he had cleaned it up almost single-handedly, earning the respect of honest citizens and the fear of criminals throughout the territory. Lost his wife and child to fever back in Texas before he came here, Mrs. Porter told her one afternoon while helping Olivia brush her hair. Never spoke of remarrying, though plenty of ladies have set their caps for him. He seems very dedicated to his work, Olivia observed, trying to sound merely curious rather than intensely interested. Mrs. Porter gave her a knowing smile. That he is. But I've never seen him bring anyone to his home before, let alone give up his bed for them. You've made quite an impression on our sheriff, Miss Matthews. Olivia blushed, unsure how to respond. She couldn't deny that she found Samuel attractive not just physically, though his tall, strong frame and handsome features certainly appealed to her, but also for his kindness, his sense of duty, and the gentle way he had cared for her when she was at her most vulnerable. On the afternoon of the third day, Dr. Miller visited to check on her ankle and pronounced her fit to move about with the aid of crutches. Just don't put any weight on that foot, he warned. It'll be at least 6 weeks before you're walking normally again. After he left, Olivia practiced using the crutches, making her way slowly around the bedroom and then, daringly, to the top of the stairs. She was considering attempting to go down when she heard the front door open and recognized Samuel's steady tread in the hallway below. Miss Matthews. He called up, "Are you awake?" "Yes," she called back. "Dr. Miller brought me crutches. I'm at the top of the stairs." There was a pause, then the sound of boots on the stairs. Samuel appeared, looking tired but relieved to see her up. His clothes were dusty, and there was a small cut on his cheek that hadn't been there when he left. "You're hurt," Olivia said, forgetting her own precarious position on the crutches as she leaned forward in concern. Samuel touched the cut absently. "It's nothing. Just a branch that caught me while we were tracking the gang." His eyes softened as he took in her determined stance on the crutches. "It's good to see you up, but those stairs are steep. Allow me." Before Olivia could respond, he had moved up beside her and swept her into his arms, crutches and all, as if she weighed nothing. Her heart hammered in her chest at the sudden closeness, and she caught a whiff of leather, horse, and something uniquely Samuel, a clean, masculine scent that made her feel strangely dizzy. He carried her down to the small parlor and set her gently on a comfortable settee, propping her injured ankle on a footstool before placing the crutches within her reach. "Thank you," she said, trying to regain her composure. Did you find them, the Garrison gang?" Samuel's expression darkened as he took a seat in an armchair across from her. "We tracked them to an abandoned mine about 20 miles west, had them cornered, but they slipped away through a back tunnel we didn't know about." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Luke was wounded, just like the stage driver said, left a blood trail halfway across the territory, but they're still out there." "You'll catch them," Olivia said with conviction. "I know you will." Samuel looked at her with surprise, then gratitude. "Your faith means a lot, especially after what they did to you." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I wanted to tell you that I spoke with the town council about the teaching position. They're eager to meet you, and they've offered a monthly salary of $40 plus room and board at the schoolhouse, which has living quarters attached." Olivia's eyes widened. It was a generous offer for a small frontier town. That's very kind of them." "It's not charity," Samuel assured her. "We've been trying to find a qualified teacher for months. Most aren't willing to come this far west." He hesitated before adding, "The school term doesn't start for another month, which gives your ankle time to heal. You could stay here until then, if that wouldn't make you uncomfortable." The implication that she would be living alone with an unmarried man for several more weeks should have scandalized Olivia. In Boston, it would have ruined her reputation beyond repair. But here in Redemption with Samuel, the arrangement felt natural and right. "I wouldn't be uncomfortable," she said softly. "You've been nothing but a gentleman, Sheriff Blackwood." "Samuel," he corrected her. "If we're going to be housemates for a while longer, you might as well use my given name." Samuel, she repeated, liking the way it felt on her lips. And you must call me Olivia. A small smile curved his lips, transforming his tired face. Olivia, then, welcome to redemption. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and Samuel settled into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. In the mornings, Samuel would help her down to the kitchen before leaving for his duties, and Mrs. Porter would arrive to help with household matters. In the afternoons, various town residents would stop by to meet the new teacher, bringing small gifts and staying for tea. Olivia discovered that she enjoyed the directness of the frontier people. There was none of the artificial politeness or rigid social structures that had constrained her in Boston. Here, people were judged by their character and contributions to the community, not by their family name or social connections. As her strength returned, Olivia began to take short trips outside, first just to sit on the porch and later, with Samuel's assistance, to visit the school and meet some of her future pupils. The schoolhouse was small but well built, with living quarters that consisted of a bedroom, sitting room, and small kitchen at the back. The previous teacher had left most of the furniture, and the town council promised to have everything cleaned and ready by the time school started. In the evenings, Samuel would return home, and they would share dinner, often prepared by Mrs. Porter before she left for the day. After dinner, they would sit in the parlor, Olivia reading aloud from one of Samuel's books while he cleaned his guns or worked on reports. These quiet evenings became the highlight of Olivia's days, and she found herself watching Samuel when he wasn't looking, admiring the strength in his hands, the focus in his blue eyes, the rare but transformative smile that would appear when something amused him. As the weeks passed, Olivia realized with a mixture of surprise and concern that she was falling in love with her rescuer. She tried to rationalize her feelings. It was natural to feel attached to someone who had saved her life, who had shown her such kindness and respect. But deep down, she knew it was more than gratitude. There was something about Samuel Blackwood that called to her heart in a way no man ever had before. Whether he felt the same was harder to determine. Samuel was unfailingly polite and attentive, but also reserved, rarely speaking about personal matters. Occasionally, she would catch him looking at her with an expression that made her breath catch, but he would quickly mask it when he realized she had noticed. One evening, about 5 weeks after her arrival in Redemption, Olivia was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when Samuel returned from his duties. Instead of entering the house as usual, he joined her on the porch, leaning against the railing and removing his hat. "Nice evening," he commented, his eyes on the spectacular colors painting the western sky. "Beautiful," Olivia agreed, though she found herself looking at him rather than the sunset. The golden light bathed his features, softening the lines that his work had carved into his face. "Doctor Miller says you can try walking without the crutches tomorrow," Samuel said. "Just for short distances at first," Olivia nodded. "I'll be glad to be mobile again, though I'll miss having such a gallant escort." A slight flush colored Samuel's cheeks, and he looked down. "It's been no trouble." "Still, I've imposed on you for far too long," Olivia said, suddenly worried that he might be eager to reclaim his home and privacy. "The schoolhouse is nearly ready. I could move in early if no," Samuel interrupted with unexpected force. Then more gently, "I mean, there's no need to rush. The place still needs work, and it's no imposition having you here." He hesitated, then admitted, "Truth is, I've grown accustomed to your company. The house was too quiet before you came." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "I've enjoyed your company as well, Samuel." A moment of charged silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken feelings. Then Samuel straightened, his expression turning serious. "We received word today. The territorial marshal and his deputies have joined the hunt for the garrison gang. They were spotted near the border heading south. I'm riding out with them tomorrow." Olivia felt a cold fear grip her heart. For how long? Hard to say. Could be a few days, could be weeks. Samuel's eyes met hers. "I've asked Deputy Collins to keep an eye on you while I'm gone. Mrs. Porter will stay here at night." "I'll be fine," Olivia assured him, though the thought of him facing the dangerous outlaws terrified her. "Just be careful, please." Samuel stepped closer, his expression intense. Olivia, I need to tell you something before I go. He took a deep breath. When I found you by that well, half dead from thirst and exposure, something happened to me, something I can't quite explain. I've spent 5 years in this town doing my job, living day to day without really feeling much of anything. Then you came into my life and suddenly everything's different. Olivia stood, forgetting her injured ankle, and swayed slightly. Immediately, Samuel's hands were on her arms, steadying her. What I'm trying to say, poorly, is that I care for you, more than I should, perhaps, given how short a time we've known each other. His voice was low, almost rough with emotion. I have no right to ask anything of you. You're educated, refined, you could have your pick of gentlemen back east, but I couldn't ride out tomorrow without telling you how I feel. Olivia's heart soared at his words. Without hesitation, she reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. Samuel, I care for you too, so much that it frightens me sometimes. What I feel for you isn't gratitude for saving my life, it's deeper than that. When I'm with you, I feel safe, but also alive in a way I never have before. Samuel's eyes darkened at her words, and his hands tightened slightly on her arms. Olivia, he murmured, his voice husky with emotion. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Olivia responded without hesitation, her arms sliding up to encircle his neck as she returned the kiss with all the feeling that had been building in her heart over the past weeks. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. I'll come back to you, he promised. No matter what it takes. I'll be waiting, Olivia whispered, knowing with absolute certainty that her future was here with this man in this small frontier town that had become her sanctuary. Dawn broke cold and clear the next morning. Olivia stood on the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the chill, watching as Samuel checked his saddle and weapons one final time. He was dressed for the trail in sturdy clothing, a rifle in his saddle holster and his pistol at his hip. Despite her fear for his safety, she couldn't help but admire how he looked strong, capable, every inch the frontier lawman. Deputy Collins and 3 other riders waited at the end of the street, while Mrs. Porter stood nearby, a worried expression on her kindly face. The entire town seemed to be holding its breath, aware of the danger their sheriff was riding into. The marshal and his men will meet us at Copper Creek, Samuel told Olivia as he finished his preparations. From there, we'll follow the gang's trail south. Olivia nodded, trying to hide her anxiety. How will I know if, when you're coming back, I'll send word when I can, he promised. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I want you to have this for safekeeping. He placed it in her palm, a simple silver ring with a small turquoise stone. It was my mother's, he explained. The only thing of value I own besides my guns and badge. Olivia's eyes filled with tears as she closed her fingers around the ring. I'll keep it safe until you return. Samuel cupped her face with one hand, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. This isn't goodbye, he said firmly, just to see you soon. He kissed her then, a brief but intense meeting of lips that held both promise and farewell. Then he mounted his horse in one fluid motion, tipped his hat to Mrs. Porter and rode toward the waiting men. At the end of the street, he turned back once, raising his hand in salute to Olivia. She returned the gesture, holding her composure until he had ridden out of sight. Only then did she allow the tears to fall freely. Mrs. Porter put a comforting arm around her shoulders. He'll be back, she said with conviction. Samuel Blackwood is the most determined man I've ever known, and now he has something precious to come back to. The days following Samuel's departure were the longest of Olivia's life. She tried to keep busy, dividing her time between preparations for the upcoming school term and helping Mrs. Porter with household tasks. Her ankle continued to heal, and within a week, she was able to walk short distances without the crutches, though she still tired easily. News came sporadically through telegraph messages that Deputy Collins would bring to her immediately. The posse had joined with the marshal's men. They had picked up the gang's trail. They were moving south toward the Mexican border, 2 weeks after Samuel's departure, Olivia moved into the living quarters behind the schoolhouse. The town council had arranged for the space to be thoroughly cleaned and had even provided new curtains and bedding. Mrs. Porter continued to visit daily, and many of the townspeople stopped by with small welcoming gifts: a potted plant, homemade preserves, a knitted blanket. Olivia appreciated their kindness, but the schoolhouse felt empty and lonely compared to Samuel's home. At night, she would hold his mother's ring, running her finger over the smooth turquoise stone, and pray for his safe return. She threw herself into preparing for the school term, reviewing the available textbooks, creating lesson plans, and meeting with parents and students. The work kept her mind occupied during the day, but at night, her thoughts invariably turned to Samuel, wondering where he was, if he was safe, when he would return to her. 3 weeks after his departure, a new telegraph arrived. Deputy Collins brought it to her as she was arranging desks in the schoolroom, his young face grave. "It's from the marshal, madam," he said, handing her the paper with obvious reluctance. With trembling hands, Olivia unfolded the message and read: "Garrison gang cornered, stop shootout at Devil's Canyon, stop 3 gang members killed, stop 2 lawmen wounded including Sheriff Blackwood, stop returning to redemption with wounded, stop Ida 3 days, stop." The paper fluttered from Olivia's suddenly numb fingers. "Wounded," she whispered. "How badly?" Deputy Collins shook his head. "Telegraph doesn't say, madam, but they're bringing him home, and that's a good sign." Olivia nodded mechanically, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. 3 days, she murmured. "He'll be here in 3 days." The next 3 days were a special kind of torture. Olivia alternated between frantic preparation for Samuel's return, ensuring his house was clean and comfortable, checking with Dr. Miller about medical supplies, and periods of paralyzing fear about his condition. Mrs. Porter tried to reassure her. "Samuel's strong as an ox. Whatever injury he sustained, he'll recover." But Olivia had seen too much death in her life, her mother when she was a child, her father more recently, to take anything for granted. She wore Samuel's ring on a chain around her neck and found herself touching it constantly, as if it could somehow connect her to him. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, a rider galloped into town, stirring up dust as he reined in before the sheriff's office. Olivia, who had been watching from the schoolhouse window, hurried outside as quickly as her still healing ankle would allow. The rider, one of the marshal's deputies, dismounted and addressed the small crowd that had quickly gathered. "Marshal's party is about 2 hours behind me," he announced. "Sheriff Blackwood is wounded but stable. Doc Miller should be ready. He'll need attention as soon as they arrive." A murmur ran through the crowd, relief mixed with concern. Dr. Miller stepped forward. "How bad is it?" "Bullet to the shoulder," the deputy replied. "Clean through, but he's lost a lot of blood and the wounds showing signs of infection. Marshal thought it best to get him home where he could rest properly rather than trying to treat him on the trail." Olivia felt light-headed with a mixture of relief and renewed worry. A shoulder wound could be serious, especially if infected, but it wasn't necessarily fatal. Samuel was alive and coming home to her. The next 2 hours were a blur of activity as the town prepared for the returning posse. Dr. Miller gathered his supplies, the hotel prepared rooms for the marshal and his men, and Mrs. Porter helped Olivia ensure that Samuel's house was ready to receive its injured owner. When the riders finally appeared on the horizon, Olivia was waiting at the edge of town, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. 6 men rode slowly into redemption, 2 of them supporting a 3rd figure slumped in his saddle, Samuel. Even from a distance, Olivia could see how pale he was, his normally upright posture now hunched in pain. His left arm was secured in a makeshift sling, and dark stains that could only be blood marked his shirt. As the party reached the town limits, Samuel raised his head wearily, his eyes scanning the waiting crowd until they found Olivia. Even in his weakened state, the relief and joy that washed over his features at the sight of her was unmistakable. Dr. Miller stepped forward as the riders came to a halt. "Bring him to my office immediately," he ordered. Two men helped Samuel dismount, supporting him as his knees buckled momentarily. Olivia rushed forward, heedless of propriety or her own still healing ankle. "Samuel," she breathed, reaching for his good hand, his fingers closed around hers with surprising strength. "Olivia," he murmured, his voice rough with pain but his eyes clear as they met hers. "Told you I'd come back. Let's get him inside, doctor." Miller interrupted, though his expression was sympathetic as he observed their clasped hands. The next hour was agonizing for Olivia as she waited outside the doctor's office while Dr. Miller treated Samuel's wound. The marshal, a weathered man named Harrington, sat with her on the porch, filling her in on what had happened. "We tracked them to a canyon about 50 miles south of the border," he explained. "Had them cornered, but they fought like cornered rats. Your sheriff, he saved my life. Took a bullet meant for me when Luke Garrison tried to ambush me from above." Olivia's eyes widened. "Did you? Are they all?" "Dead or captured," the marshal confirmed grimly. 3 dead, including Luke. The other 2 are on their way to the territorial prison. They won't see daylight as free men again. Before Olivia could respond, Dr. Miller opened the door. "He's asking for you," he said to Olivia. "I've cleaned and dressed the wound, given him something for the pain and the infection. He needs rest now, but he's insisting on seeing you first." Olivia rose immediately, her heart in her throat as she entered the doctor's office. Samuel lay on the examination table, his upper body bare except for the heavy bandaging around his left shoulder. His face was drawn with pain, but his eyes brightened when she entered. "There you are," he said softly. Olivia moved to his side, taking his right hand carefully in both of hers. "You scared me half to death," she said, her voice catching. A ghost of his usual smile touched his lips. "Sorry about that, didn't plan on getting shot. The marshal told me what you did." "How you saved his life." Samuel shrugged slightly, then winced at the movement. "Just doing my job." Olivia shook her head, tears threatening. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," he pointed out, his hand tightened on hers. "I had something important to come back for, doctor." Miller cleared his throat from the doorway. "He needs to rest now. We should move him home where he'll be comfortable. I'll have some men bring a stretcher." "No stretcher," Samuel objected, attempting to sit up. "I can walk." "You most certainly cannot," Dr. Miller said firmly. "That wound needs to stay still if it's going to heal properly." Samuel looked ready to argue further, but Olivia laid a gentle hand on his uninjured shoulder. "Please, Samuel, let them help you this once." He subsided at her touch, his expression softening. "All right, for you." 4 men carried Samuel carefully to his home on a stretcher improvised from a blanket stretched between 2 poles. Olivia walked beside him, her hand never leaving his, while Dr. Miller followed with instructions for his care. "The bullet passed clean through, which is fortunate," the doctor explained as they settled Samuel in his bedroom. "But there's infection setting in. He'll need the wound cleaned and dressed twice daily, and he must take this powder for the infection and this laudanum for the pain." Olivia nodded, mentally noting everything. "I'll take care of him." Dr. Miller raised an eyebrow. "It wouldn't be appropriate for you to stay here alone with him, Miss Matthews, injured or not." Before Olivia could respond, Mrs. Porter stepped forward from where she had been arranging things in the sick room. "I'll be here as chaperone, doctor. No need to worry about propriety." Dr. Miller looked between the 2 women, then at Samuel, who was watching Olivia with an expression that left little doubt about his feelings. The doctor sighed. "Very well, but I'll be checking in regularly." After he left, Mrs. Porter tactfully busied herself downstairs, leaving Olivia alone with Samuel. She sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle his injured shoulder. "You don't have to stay," Samuel said, though his eyes pleaded otherwise. "School starts in a week. You must have preparations." "Everything important is done," Olivia assured him, "and nothing is more important than making sure you recover properly." Samuel's free hand reached up to touch the chain around her neck, finding the ring that hung there. "You kept it safe," he murmured. "Of course I did." Olivia covered his hand with hers. "I kept it close to my heart, just like I kept you." His eyes, though tired and pained, were full of emotion as they met hers. "When I was lying there in that canyon, bleeding and not sure if I'd make it, all I could think about was getting back to you. The thought of you waiting here gave me the strength to hold on. Olivia felt tears well up. Don't ever scare me like that again, Samuel Blackwood. A small smile curved his lips. Yes, madam. He drifted off to sleep soon after, the medication taking effect, but his hand remained clasped in Olivia's, as if even in sleep he feared letting her go. The next week passed in a blur of nursing duties for Olivia. True to his word, Dr. Miller visited daily to check on Samuel's wound, which slowly began to show signs of healing as the infection receded. Mrs. Porter stayed in the house as promised, but tactfully gave Olivia and Samuel privacy during the day while she attended to household tasks. Despite his injury, or perhaps because of the enforced rest it required, Samuel seemed more relaxed than Olivia had ever seen him. They spent hours talking about their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Samuel told her about his wife and infant son who had died of fever in Texas, and how their loss had driven him to seek a new start in the territories. Olivia shared stories of her strict Boston upbringing and her father's financial ruin that had left her with no choice but to seek employment far from home. I thought coming west was the worst thing that could happen to me, she admitted one afternoon as she changed his bandage. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. Samuel watched her face as she worked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Does that mean you're planning to stay in Redemption, even after you're fully recovered? Olivia's hands stilled on the bandage. Do you want me to stay? More than anything, Samuel replied without hesitation, but I want you to stay because it's what you want, not out of obligation or gratitude. Olivia finished securing the bandage, then sat back to look at him directly. Samuel Blackwood, do you really think it's gratitude I feel for you? A hint of vulnerability crossed his face. You had a life planned in Tucson, a position at a larger school, better prospects. Better than what? She challenged gently. Better than a town where people have welcomed me with open arms, better than work that will be meaningful and appreciated. Better than, she hesitated, then finished softly, better than being with the man I love. Samuel's breath caught audibly. Olivia, he whispered, reaching for her hand. She placed her palm against his, their fingers intertwining naturally. I love you, Samuel. Not because you rescued me, though I'll always be grateful for that. I love you for the man you are, honorable, kind, brave. I love the way you care for this town, the way you make me feel safe and cherished. I love your quiet strength and your rare but wonderful smile. Samuel's eyes were suspiciously bright as he listened. When she finished, he brought their joined hands to his lips and kissed her fingers. I love you too, Olivia Matthews, more than I ever thought possible. When I found you by that well, I had no idea I was also finding my heart, which I thought was long dead. He tugged gently on her hand, drawing her closer. I know this isn't the most romantic setting, me flat on my back with a hole in my shoulder, but I need to ask you something. Will you marry me, Olivia? Will you make a life with me here in Redemption? Joy burst in Olivia's chest like a sunrise. Yes, she said simply, her smile radiant. Yes, Samuel, I will marry you. He pulled her down for a kiss, his right arm wrapping around her as their lips met in a tender promise of all that was to come. The school term began the following week, with Olivia dividing her time between her teaching duties and caring for Samuel, whose recovery was progressing well. The children of Redemption quickly grew to love their new teacher, who brought an enthusiasm and creativity to her lessons that had been lacking under the previous instructor. As September turned to October, Samuel's strength returned gradually. He began light duties at the sheriff's office, though Deputy Collins continued to handle the more strenuous aspects of the job. In the evenings, Samuel and Olivia would sit on his porch, watching the sunset and planning their future. Dr. Miller says I can return to full duties next month, Samuel told her one evening in late October. Just in time for our wedding. They had set the date for mid-November when Samuel would be fully recovered and Olivia could take a brief break from teaching over Thanksgiving. The entire town was buzzing with excitement over the upcoming nuptials of their sheriff and teacher. Mrs. Porter is beside herself with the wedding preparations, Olivia said with a laugh. You'd think she was the mother of the bride. Samuel smiled, his arm around Olivia's shoulders as they sat side by side on the porch swing. She's adopted you, that's for sure. This whole town has. Olivia leaned her head against his good shoulder, contentment washing over her. It's more of a home than Boston ever was. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Then Samuel shifted slightly, reaching into his pocket. I have something for you, he said, producing a small box. I had it made special. Olivia opened the box to find his mother's ring, the silver cleaned to a bright shine and the turquoise stone now set in a more elaborate mounting. I had the silversmith reset it, Samuel explained. Thought it should look more like a proper engagement ring. It's beautiful, Olivia breathed, slipping it onto her finger where it fit perfectly. I'll treasure it always. Just like I'll treasure you, Samuel murmured, drawing her close for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, with just enough autumn chill in the air to put roses in Olivia's cheeks as Mrs. Porter helped her dress in the small room behind the church. Her gown was simple but elegant ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, ordered specially from Denver and arrived just 3 days before. You look beautiful, my dear, Mrs. Porter said, adjusting the small wreath of dried flowers that crowned Olivia's auburn hair, which hung loose down her back at Samuel's request. Our sheriff won't know what hit him. Olivia's stomach fluttered with nerves and excitement. I can hardly believe this is happening. 6 months ago, I was lying half dead beside a cracked well, certain my life was over. Now I'm about to begin a new life with the most wonderful man I've ever known. Mrs. Porter squeezed her hand. The Lord works in mysterious ways, child. Sometimes our greatest blessings come from our darkest moments. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Marshal Harrington, who had returned to Redemption for the wedding and had offered to walk Olivia down the aisle in place of her deceased father. Ready, Miss Matthews? He asked, his weathered face softening as he took in her appearance. You look lovely. Olivia took a deep breath and nodded. I'm ready. The small church was filled to capacity with what seemed like the entire population of Redemption. As the simple piano music began, and Olivia appeared at the back of the church on the marshal's arm, a collective murmur of appreciation swept through the gathering. But Olivia had eyes only for Samuel, who stood at the altar in a new black suit, his badge polished and pinned to his vest, his blue eyes widening at the sight of her. His left arm was still held slightly stiffly, a reminder of his wound, but he stood tall and strong, his face alight with love as she approached. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, with Reverend Thompson speaking about the mysterious ways God brings people together and the blessing of finding love in unexpected places. When it came time for the vows, Samuel's strong voice filled the church with unwavering certainty as he promised to love, honor, and protect Olivia for all the days of his life. Olivia's own voice trembled slightly with emotion as she returned those vows, but her eyes were steady on Samuel's as she pledged her heart and life to him. When they were pronounced husband and wife, and Samuel leaned down to kiss her with tender reverence, she felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables laden with food contributed by every household in Redemption. There was music and dancing, with Samuel insisting on a dance with his bride despite his still healing shoulder. Don't overdo it, Olivia cautioned as he led her in a gentle waltz, his right arm secure around her waist. Nothing could keep me from dancing with my wife on our wedding day, he replied, the word wife rolling off his tongue with obvious pleasure. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a golden glow over the continuing festivities. Samuel and Olivia slipped away quietly, walking hand in hand to the house that was now truly their home. On the porch, Samuel paused, turning to Olivia with a serious expression. Before we go in, I want to say something. He took both her hands in his. 6 months ago, I was just existing, doing my job, but not really living. Then I found you, half dead beside that old well, and everything changed. You brought light and love back into my life, Olivia. You gave me a reason to want more than just the next day." Tears shimmered in Olivia's eyes at his words. "And you gave me a chance at survival when I thought all was lost. But more than that, you gave me a home, a purpose, and a love I never dreamed possible." Samuel's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb gently brushing away a tear that had escaped. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood." Then, with a swift movement that made Olivia laugh in surprise, he swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold into their home and their new life together. Epilogue 5 years later, Olivia stood on the porch of the expanded schoolhouse, watching as her students spilled out into the yard at the end of the day. Redemption had grown considerably in those 5 years, with the arrival of the railroad bringing new businesses and families to the once small frontier town. As the last student disappeared down the street, Olivia turned to gather her books and papers. At 30, she was even more beautiful than she had been when Samuel found her by the well, with a quiet confidence and contentment that enhanced her natural grace. Her hand rested briefly on her swollen belly, feeling the movement of the child that would arrive in just a few months, their second child, a sibling for 3-year-old James. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, a smile already forming on her lips as she recognized the rider approaching. Samuel, now in his late 30s, still cut an impressive figure on horseback, his badge catching the late afternoon sun as he rode toward the schoolhouse. "How are my favorite teacher and junior deputy today?" he called, dismounting with the easy grace that had returned fully after his injury healed. "We're both well," Olivia replied, her smile widening as he bounded up the steps to greet her with a kiss. "Though your junior deputy has been practicing her kicking skills all afternoon." Samuel placed his hand over hers on her belly, his face softening with wonder as he felt the baby move. "She's strong like her mama, or stubborn like her papa," Olivia teased, leaning into his embrace. They stood for a moment in comfortable silence, watching as the town went about its evening business. Redemption had prospered under Sheriff Blackwood's protection and Mrs. Blackwood's educational influence. The rough edges had been smoothed away, though it retained the frontier spirit that had first drawn them both to make it their home. "I rode by the old Jenkins place today," Samuel said as they began walking home, his arm around her waist. "The well's completely collapsed now." Olivia shivered slightly, remembering those desperate hours when she had lain beside the cracked well, certain she would die there. "It's strange to think how close I came to never knowing all this happiness." Samuel's arm tightened around her. "I still thank God every day that I decided to take the long way home that night." "As do I," Olivia said softly, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You didn't just save my life, Samuel Blackwood, you gave me a reason to live it fully." "And you gave me back my heart," he replied, bending to kiss her once more as the setting sun bathed them in golden light, two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vast wilderness of the American frontier. As they continued their walk home to where little James waited with Mrs. Porter, who had become like a grandmother to the boy, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the brink of death beside a cracked well to a life overflowing with love and purpose. It was more than she could have ever imagined on that fateful day when a cowboy rode in and gave her a chance at survival.